Drippers out in Vegas, you want it to. Booties just don't shake like a silver too. Molly's on the tools, they not one or two. Now my tack was two. Look at all the gas I put.
Hey guys, Chris from Average Eskate Reviews here, and I'm back with another video. This one we're going to be looking at my riding essentials. So these are the things that I make sure that I have with me every single time I go for a ride. If it's just a sense of security, if it's things that I use for protection, that sounds a bit funny, but you know what I mean. Or if it's just things that I like to make sure that I have on me because we typically ride very, very far from where we live. We'll get trains into London, we'll go to other cities. So last thing you want is something going wrong or you needing to replace or repair something and not having any access to it. So let's go through my riding essentials. At the end of this video or during this video, please feel free to comment down below what your riding essentials are. Let me know if there's anything that you feel like I've missed out of this one that you take with you that you'd strongly advise me to do the same with. Let's have a bit of a commenting section down below and see what other people are riding with, what other people recommend, and see if we can help each other out, make sure we have everything we need when we're out on our boards. Make sure that you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe and turn the notification bell on so you can stay up to date with all of the content that I post. Of course, before we jump into this video, this does exclude the most obvious thing that you want to have with you when you're riding, which is going to be the charger for your board. So the first thing that you definitely want to make sure that you have with you is, of course, a helmet. And I know some of the videos that I've filmed previously, sometimes or some scenes, I'm not wearing a helmet. That's either been the instances where I've simply just forgotten one when I've been leaving in a rush. Not ideal, but I strongly recommend if you're going to be riding one of these high-powered boards, make sure that you're protected. You don't want to come off and cause yourself any permanent injury. Wide range of helmets you can get, traditional skating helmets. I prefer the Rurik helmets, but without any of the grills or the visors over my face. I don't typically like things covering my face, but that's what I like to go for based on the way that it looks and how it feels when it's on my head. And because it's quite cold right now, the Rurik helmets are quite warm, so that benefits me as well. From there, one of the other things that I really like to make sure that I have in my bag is a reflective jacket. Now, I know there's lots of things that you can do with a skateboard to make yourself more visible in low light or at night, like shred lights, but personally, as a driver myself, me looking for lights that are basically an inch off of the ground is not something that I typically do. I know they are better than having nothing, but I think the lights are just way, way too low. I think it makes more sense to have a light on your back or on a bag and holding a flashlight in front of you rather than attaching lights to your board to make yourself more visible. But that's just my perspective, my opinion. And also I hate the way that they look as well, so I don't particularly like those types of things being attached to my board. I prefer to have a reflective jacket because even when the tiniest bit of light hits you, the reflective jacket pops, you can see it from miles away, and I feel like it's just a much better way of being visible at night, especially to other vehicles, because they're all going to have their lights on, and if you have just a flashlight and shred lights on your board, that's not really great. The flashlight's great for being able to see terrain or any debris on the road or what surfaces you're riding on, but it doesn't really help from a safety perspective as much as a reflective coat. Again, my opinion, but that's the way that I like to do things. That quickly leads me on to the next thing, which is a flashlight. Like I mentioned before about my opinion on lights being attached to the boards, I prefer to have a high-powered flashlight in my hand because it means that I can see what's a few meters in front of me, so I know if I can either go over it or if I need to turn to avoid it or if I need to brake. So a high-powered flashlight that I can fit inside my bag that takes just rechargeable batteries or batteries I can buy in a store is ideal to make sure that I don't have to freak out or worry when I'm riding late at night, depending on where I am or regardless of where I am, in fact. From there, it's going to be gloves. Now, this doesn't really seem like a big deal. Of course, number one, you want them to keep you warm, but I've been using Flatland 3D gloves for well over a year now, and I'm a massive fan of them. I did cut out the thumb and also the index finger from my right hand on my gloves, just because at the time I was riding the Boosted Board Stealth, and the little scroll dial that you use to accelerate and brake is hard to control when you have gloves on. But now that I'm using the Evolve GTR Carbon and Bamboo, that's not really an issue, but it also helps if I'm using my phone. but that, in case you're wondering why I've got 2 cutouts on my gloves, that's why. But these gloves are really good. They're protected in all of the areas that would impact the ground if you were to come off your board. It also has some wrist harnesses, or wrist support rather, so if you do come off the board, your hands go down first. It'll help to keep your wrist in a position that's going to minimize the amount of damage or possibility of breaks that you might sustain, so that's always great. But they're definitely recommended. I can tell you there's been a couple of instances where they have bailed us out, especially if you know what happens when you hit the road at even 10-15 miles an hour with your palms. So they're strongly recommended to anyone that's riding, regardless of where you are. Something else that I like to wear, but under my jeans, I'm definitely not a fan of the look that you get with wearing knee pads or any sort of knee protection over the top of your jeans or your trousers. I think it looks horrible. I know it's being better safe than sorry, but I prefer to go for low profile pads that I can wear underneath my jeans because typically we'll be going into a lot of bars, a lot of restaurants while we're riding our boards, and that's just not a good look for me. It's not something that I like to even consider or do myself. So I like to go for low profile pads that I can wear underneath my jeans that are really unnoticeable. So even if I'm doing day-to-day general things and I have my board with me, you can't really see the level of protection I have on me. I'm also messing around with D3O. I'll link a video down below, which is to my other channel, where you can see what we've done with D3O pads. We actually have a pretty good relationship with the company D3O, who are based in London. If you guys have heard of D3O, or even if you haven't, I'll link a video down below so you can check it out. But I'm trying to find a way to incorporate that material into some of the clothes, some of the jackets and jumpers like this that I wear while I'm traditionally skating. So that's something that hopefully we'll have some content on later down the line. So from there, I'm going to touch on some of the things that you'd want to have with you, depending on which board that you have. Now, as just like a basic, you're going to want to make sure that you have a multi-tool to be able to loosen or unloosen the wheels if you need to change a belt or anything like that. So definitely make sure you have one of those, an Allen key if the board that you need requires one of those. Having the tools that you need to be able to disassemble and reassemble the board in the event that you need to replace any of the parts on it is definitely worth having inside your bag. From there, it's also going to be the belts, as I just said, that one of the things that you may need to replace while you're out. If your board is a belt-driven board, it's always worth having replaceable belts. In the unlikely event that you break one while you're miles away from your house, you don't have to worry about getting a taxi or whatever, trying to get back to be able to do it. You can just do it wherever you are, providing you have the spare belt and also the tools to remove and reattach it when you're replacing it. And something else that we've just moved on to, instead of having to use manual tools to loosen nuts or bolts, or even using an Allen key manually to take out the screws that you need to replace different parts of your board, is to have a powered drill with you that you can replace the heads on. Speeds things up. It also makes the whole process a lot less frustrating because some of the boards that you ride can have a lot of screws on them. It can take time to loosen and tighten all of them. So if you have a powered one or a battery operated one, saves time, gets you back out onto the streets riding quicker. It might also be worth having a little zip tie bag with some of the screws and bolts and nuts that you might need for your board, in case any of them get cross-threaded or anything else happens to them while you're replacing parts on your board. It's not something that's really difficult to have. It doesn't take up much space in the bag, and it could get you out of a pinch. And with the little zip tie bag that you can have inside your bag with extra screws, nuts and bolts, it might also be worth throwing in a couple of bearings in there, because it's not very likely that it might happen, but you could hit something or do something to the board of the wheel that ruins the bearings inside there. So having spares of those isn't really difficult to do, and it could again get you out of a pinch. Some of the things that I also like to carry with me that's a little bit more unusual is going to be a spare battery for my board. Now, of course, depending on which board you have and how the battery is attached to the board, this might not be something that you can do. But if you have one of the Evolves or you have a booster board, for example, it's something that's very easy to do. It just means that if we're going out for a particularly long ride, we don't have to worry about finding a charge point. Because although the Evolve boards have crazy range on them, the charge time between 2 to 3 hours is quite long. If you don't want to sacrifice that time during the day, if you live somewhere where weather isn't always on your side, it's worth having a spare battery that you can switch out. And this is where having the powered tool to be able to remove the nuts, screws and bolts on the board comes in handy, because these boards have roughly between, I think it's like 15 or 14 screws to be able to get to the battery. So if you have a powered tool, it just takes a couple of minutes to be able to switch out a battery. It means that you can be back out riding much quicker than you would if you're doing things manually. So having an extra battery with my Bamboo, it's the travel battery, which fits really nicely into my bag, has roughly half the range of the traditional battery, but it still means that I can be riding longer without having to worry about charging. Something else that's a bit unusual that I like to carry is also a spare remote. It's not happened to me more than once, but there has been times where I've broken a remote, I've dropped it, it's pretty much exploded into pieces on the ground, and there's nothing that you can do once that happens. It's not something you can run to a store and pick up, especially here in the UK, unless you're in London and you live somewhere near Wick. Shameless plug, but they'll be down below if you're in the UK and you're looking for a good e-skate store. But it's definitely something that's worth having inside your bag. It could get you out of a pinch, and it could avoid you from ruining an entire day when all you want to do is ride your board. So that's two things that are a little bit unusual to have, but I definitely like to carry a spare battery and a spare remote with me whatever chance I get to do so. Next to having a spare remote, it's also worth having the cable that you need to be able to charge the remote up from. Now, with the Bamboo board, it does have USB ports on it, so just having the cable is enough. And usually if you're out in a city, it's not very difficult to find somewhere to be able to plug in a USB and then plug in the remote to be able to charge. So I don't typically take the other end with me to be able to put into the mains, but just making sure that I have the cable, because I've normally got a laptop with me inside my bag anyway, so I can charge the remote off of that. But having the charger for the remote is definitely worth having with you, because there has been numerous occasions where I've remembered to charge my board up, but I haven't remembered to charge my remote, and I've been kind of a little bit sketchy the entire time I'm riding, looking at the display to make sure my remote's not going to die on me while I'm out. Now, something that really only applies to wheels or tires that have inner tubes is to have a spare with you. As I've said in previous videos, I ride AT 6-inch a lot. It's pretty much my default option to go to. And I've never had a flat tire yet, touch wood. That hasn't happened to me while I've been out riding around, but after receiving a wheel that I ordered that came already with a flat in it, it kind of made me think about it and say to myself, maybe it's worth throwing in a spare inner tube into my bag just in case this happens while I'm on the road. So if you do have a board that takes air or has inner tubes, it's worth throwing in a spare wheel or a spare inner tube. Some other things that I definitely cannot go for a ride without is going to be my AirPods. I definitely like to have music, not in both ears, maybe just one ear so I can still hear what's going on around me on the streets, but I definitely don't like riding under any circumstances without music, so for me that's definitely a must-have. Last but not least, of course, is going to be a bag to put all of that stuff into. You're definitely going to need that. As always, guys, a big thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. Make sure you thumbs up the video if you liked it. Make sure you leave your comments down below of what must-have accessories or must-have items you like to take with you when you go for a ride. Don't forget to subscribe and turn the notification bell on so you can stay up to date with all of the videos that we post, and I will catch you in the next one. And any of the links for anything that we've referenced will be down below in the video description. Take care.